also to turn to Kanishk, um, uh, especially in terms of the perspective of a company doing this day to day. So wondering if, yeah, you could provide a window into how Schneider Electric is using transparency and traceability systems, and what are the main obstacles, and wondering if some supply chains tend to be particularly challenging, and if so, why? Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. So first of all, yes, it is a big challenge. And to give the context, Schneider Electric uh, operates one of the most diverse and complex supply chains. The materials that we procure range from the raw material supply chain to electrical and electronic supply chain to fabrication, including metals and plastics, to project procurement and solutions procurement and services, etc. So it's a huge conglomeration of multiple supply chains that we have within our business. Secondly, we are a fairly downstream company, which means an almost penultimate to the consumers. So between us and the first set of intervention, which happens at the time of extraction or smelting, there are almost 5 to 8 tiers or levels of interventions and entities which play. And then the materials gets to us. The third point is a lot of critical minerals that we use comes to us already embedded into the products or the components that we purchase. So there is no standalone or a category scope purchase of the critical materials. And due to the nature of the products and the nature of purchases, there is a lot of blending, a lot of intermixing, a lot of spot purchases in the upstream value chain. And that's another layer of complexity when we try to talk about transparency or any of the traceability systems. So what have we been doing in the past on this? So we have been reaching out to our suppliers, and that included multiple avenues, including manual tracing, supplier surveys, business continuity process interventions. We even deployed an AI-based model. It was a pilot that we did to try to identify the entire ecosystem of the value chain entities which are available, which are present, because manually tracing is a hugely time consuming process with several challenges, so it's not going to work out in a relatively reasonable time frame. At the end of all these exercises, we are still waiting for any solution which can give us a tangible information which can be actioned upon, which can be immediately taken up for intervention. Now, the traditional procurement approach for transparency deals, or let's say rests on the resilience framework. So it basically tries to go beyond my supplier and just say, okay, where does my supplier gets their material from? And then we try to secure those sources either through contracts, through other avenues, etc., etc. But when we talk about critical minerals, um, that approach only helps in certain categories, and it gives us a very limited visibility. It certainly does not give us the visibility that we would like to have beyond 3 or 4 tiers. Maybe some segments of fabrication supply chain, we are able to get the visibility, tier 2 or tier 3, maybe at max at those stages, but not beyond that. So the traditional approaches certainly doesn't work when we try to go for the traceability or transparency in the value chains that we are talking about. So what are the obstacles that we face when we try to reach with a new approach? Well, it's a new approach. It's a new question for not only us, a lot of our suppliers. And our suppliers, supplier. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier X. A lot of them have no clue what kind of data and why we are asking it, where to get that data, who collects, who captures that data, how to get that data. In a lot of cases, the systems to collect that data even does not exist. On top of it, as we go, I mean, especially in the capital goods segment where Schneider Electric operates, if you go in the upstream segments, the size of the supplier, let's say it is more and more of a small and medium scale enterprise, which is present heavily. And they do have a resource constraint. So a question which is often coming, where is the manpower to invest time and energy in the traceability and the exercise that you're asking? Also, commercial sensitivity is an important element. A lot of actors are hesitant to share the information because they feel, okay, if I share this with you, you are a buyer eventually, you might, just bypass me and go to my supplier directly. And this is a very real concern in, let's say, not sharing the information or the data which is required for the kind of traceability we desire on this topic. Now, if we look at, there is also, when we reach out to the suppliers and our suppliers reach out to the suppliers, there is a pattern that we see. And it kind of reflects, let's say, the 5 stages of grief. It starts with denial, then goes to anger, then something else, and eventually it's acceptance. So right now, if I assess, at least for the sector in which my company operates, we are still struggling at the stage of denial and anger. We are a little ahead, but when we go to our suppliers, we get stuck in that domain. And this connection is what each of the tiers will have to overcome, not just us with our suppliers, but our suppliers with their suppliers with their suppliers, eventually going up to the source. And this is something which is going to be extremely, extremely time consuming. We don't have that amount of time, and we cannot wait for that kind of, eventual gratification to happen and people to start accepting it. So the way that I see it's going to be helpful in expediting the entire process would be cross-functional collaboration. We need to pull in our requirements, we need to pull in our demands, and reach out to the upstream fraternity as one single voice asking for a much higher degree of accountability on the performance. I'll pause at that, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanishk. And I think at the end there, yeah, you really highlight the importance of leverage, which it seems is still elusive for many sectors, many industries. Commitment to and resources dedicated to due diligence seem to vary a great deal, and there are different incentives, and so that seems to be a real persistent pain point in terms of trying to get peers collectively to build leverage and overcome that resistance. I would point out with commercial sensitivity, that's something that we're continuing to try to better understand because in some sectors, even in the due diligence guidance, in the gold supplement, for example, we do call for disclosure of exporters in high-risk areas. We see some industry programs, some companies disclosing suppliers, and the sky has not fallen. So if it's such a concern in some sectors and not in others, we need to understand why this is. And then I think a really good point also on manpower, and that goes to a point we make in the report as well in terms of aiming to foster traceability and its upscaling, but all the while conscious not to divert resources away from due diligence overall in the most cost-effective way to achieve it, simply to achieve traceability where it may not necessarily be a prerequisite for due diligence or where there may be some serious cost challenges. So now I'm going to turn